Right. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Nancy and Brian, for agreeing to be interviewed today. So it's been a pleasure to come out here. So I've got some questions here. So I'm going to sort of relay some of these, but we'll go off script as well, I think, somewhat. So first of all, I want to ask really, what were the reasons that brought you to the Slocan Valley? And are you able to describe the push and pull factors that brought you to this area?
I was fleeing the Vietnam War. That's what brought me here. So when we first, my husband had taught at Portland State University, and he didn't get rehired because of the incredible political situation that was going on. And so we just came north. We knew we were going to come to Canada. And we went to the coast first, and we didn't like that very much. And then we drove inland to the Okanagan, and then in our VW bus with the American plates, somebody saw us, and this fellow was part of the radio station there, and he was a draft evader, and he came out to meet us, and we talked, and he said, well, if I were you, if I was looking for land, which was a constant refrain. So many of the American draft evaders were looking for land, and I said we were also interested in the communal situation because it would be easier. We were, not wealthy people. So he said, well, if I were you, I would go to Nelson. It reminds me of Lucerne. I thought, oh, yay. Okay, all right. And so the next time we got time away from the university, we came here. And then I had heard that the ashram was someplace, but I didn't know where. So we got to Nelson, looked around. It was a cute little city. And then we headed toward the ashram and got on the ferry and found the ashram. And they were wonderful and welcoming. And they had the best bookstore, the spiritual type stuff that I liked and was reading, and we got invited to lunch. This was a generous era. You were always invited to lunch. You always talked and shared ideas and stuff. So we did, and then I met Swami Radha, and Swami Radha was quite the person. She kind of looked through you as well as at you, as far as psychically. It's like, who are you? And so I told her, we said we were looking for land and perhaps a communal situation. So she said, well, the Slocan Valley is good because a lot of the Doukhobors are getting old and selling their land. And then you'll want to meet the new family. That's a communal situation. So we got in the car and drove here. And while we were driving here, there was a one for sale sign. This was a point where there were more cows in the Slocan Valley than people. And so we got out and stood in the middle of the field and thought, what the hell are we doing? And then up on the hill, we saw another VW van. And it's like, oh, there's our people. They have long hair and they have a van. Let's go stop and talk to these people. So they were on their way to the new family. We were coming for lunch, so we followed them up this incredible road and arrived, and we arrived. It's like, this is where we're supposed to be. So that's how we got here and stayed here.
Right. And you said there you were disappointed in your country of the United States there. Could you explain a bit more about, why do you think you wanted to leave the country?
Because of the Vietnam War. I wrote a story about the letter arrived, the horrible letter arrived, because even though we had one child and I was pregnant again, my husband had lost his job at the university. And if you were unemployed, you were available for the draft. And the letter arrived and said, report to your local induction office and you will be given your number. And if this number is chosen, you will be drafted into the American military. in 1968 or 9, as the Americans moved into Cambodia and started carpet bombing there.
Okay.
57,000 Americans died, and God knows how many Vietnamese, you know. It was a bloodbath, and it didn't make any sense to us, so we weren't staying for that. So, you know, thank goodness Pierre Elliott Trudeau said it was okay to come. So we came. And then found our way here. And Tommy Rada said, you know, you just kind of move. And there was a lot of that, a lot of people moving around looking for a new home. We found a better country, ultimately, but it wasn't easy. You just talk to a person here, talk to a person there, talk to a person here until you find, you know, what suits you. And the minute we got here and I met these people, I thought, this is where I want to be. This is fine. We hope. So that's what we were running from at that point.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Nancy. What about you, Brian? What brought you to the Slocan Valley?
I was one of the few Canadians. I remember a few years after we moved and were living here, I went back to Victoria for Christmas, and my relatives said, "You talk really funny." And I had developed an American accent because I was with Americans all the time. I did the English degree at UVic. The things that were going on in my life at that time were the FLQ and the War Measures Act and a lot of very disturbing things about living in Canada. Plus, we saw the Vietnam War as a Western thing, and it created problems within families. My parents were angry. Dinner parties were, you know. And I was going to go to graduate school and become an English professor. I was going to University of Chicago, where I had been given a teaching assistantship and a really clear path to get my master's degree quite quickly. And because I would be employed and be a resident of Illinois, I would have free tuition. So we also got I was married, so we had a accommodation on campus. I mean, my life was in great shape. And I got a letter from the head of the English department at the University of Chicago saying, we're excited about you coming, but I really have to tell you, they are drafting Canadian graduate students rather than drafting Americans because it's become very unpopular to draft American boys. So if you come, incredible? More than likely you will be drafted. And
that's a high price to pay.
Instead of going to university, I went and I'd been doing theater, in university. So I directed a medieval mystery play and toured the province as part of a Renaissance fair. Hippie, 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 hippie. And loved it and, made no money and communally ate in the back of Safeway stores and all of that. And then came back to Vancouver Island, and friends that I had, formed friendships with were coming to a place called the Slocan Valley where they had some kind of connection. And so there were 4 families. We all moved up together. I was the only Canadian still. They were American or English. But, yeah. So it was like an alternative, I turned in my university stuff for a backpack and hit the road. And but it was really interesting that there were hardly any Canadians here. For me, it was getting away. I was leaving a lot of the things that Nancy was leaving and wanted a new life, wanted something better. I saw Canada very critically. As these people were going, wow, this is great. I'm going, well, we have our problems too, but yeah.
Why the Slocan Valley in particular?
Because our friends had already gone there. That was the only reason. And they said, hey, this is great. There are places, you can get a place to live, whatever. So we just moved in with them. that we benefited by the Doukhobors because it was the Sons of Freedom Kristova. That's where we went. So we were in the epicenter of that community. And they had said that the Doukhobors had gone into, years before, had gone into the land registry office and said, God did not mean us to own land. And so the registry office would take the deeds back, but they weren't going to do anything about it because they didn't want any more bridges burned or anything like that. So there were these houses that were on Doukhobor Crown land. And we lived there for 3 years. We lived in a beautiful house that had everything. We didn't have electricity or running water, but we didn't want them. But we had a beautiful house with a big cook stove and, small. So we had a baby and we lived like that. And the Doukhobors in our neighborhood were wonderful to us. They gave us borscht. They helped us when we needed help. So it was quite wonderful in the early days. This was a good place to have come. And I think the Doukhobors were significant in making it a good place to come. It would have been very different going to Kelowna in those days. In fact, I don't know anybody who would go to Kelowna. Right. The Kootenays were the backwater, the poor area. Land was cheap. People were buying farms for $3,500. I didn't have $3,500, but yeah, it was an easy way to get into the Back to the Land movement, I think, here.
Well, and as far as I heard, there had been such bad press about the Doukhobors, the Sons of Freedom, and all that sort of stuff, that most Canadians were afraid to move into the area.
Absolutely. And
so that's why the prices were so low. Mm-hmm. It was a good place to buy if you weren't afraid, and we didn't know enough to be afraid. We liked them. They were nice people. I
was going to say our contacts with them defied all of the bad press because they were wonderful, gracious, giving people, But also, I was very reacting against the status quo in Victoria, British Columbia. It wasn't the States. It wasn't with all those problems, but it was not a world I wanted to be a part of. So, my early things were the islands, Askeedy Island, Hornby Island, all the islands, and hippies everywhere. That was a big Back to the Land thing. But like I said, just people I liked came here. And the idea of getting away from the coast, really, I still like it here. Yeah.
Utopia's here. Here we are. Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to ask, what were the challenges when you came here, being part of the new Family Commune, and really questions about how the commune was organised, how many people were involved, how were decisions made, how did you deal with disagreements as well, and how was labour divided up as well? So these sort of questions.
There were 17 people when I first came here. They had Carol and Eric and a number of other, Joan Smith and Michael Smith, and we were teenagers, were part of the 17, and so were the children, part of 17. So that many people lived, we had a main house with the big octagonal table, and then A-frames divided up into 4 bedroom units. And there were actually 2 on the bottom, 1 on the top. So there were 6 units in each A-frame. And the kids slept in the back of the main house. They had their bedrooms back there. And then one woman took house every day. So the woman who had house was with the kids and did the cooking for 17. If there wasn't company, and there was often company in 1969 and 70, we had animals. We had a horse and 2 cows and chickens. One year we had pigs until the bear got the pigs. We had bees until the bear got the bees. That's the things that you live with. There was also mosquitoes and chilblains. So, those are the things. So as far as how we ran things, we were very structured. The New Family Society was a very structured. We worked all the time. We were the work commune. We worked 6 days a week. So if you wanted to visit us, it was recommended that you came on a Sunday. That was our day off. So we were open to people to come and talk, because lots of people wanted to come and talk. So we would have tea in the main, in our main A-frame, and around the big octagonal table. And, it was a generous era. Food, if you bought food in huge bags and stuff, you could provide rice and beans for dinner. If we liked them, we invited them to stay for dinner. If we liked them a lot, we invited them. We were open to people coming, we were looking for people as well as people were looking for us, But, there are people you're simpatico with and not. And there was a big sign on the New Family main house that said, "We do not allow illegal drugs." We were immigrants. We could get thrown out of the country if we had anything to do with illegal drugs. So we did not. So that blew a lot of people away immediately if they wanted to come and hang out and, do that stuff. And I liked that because, it was protection. I didn't want to get thrown out of the country. So, and how is it managed? So we had a meeting once a week. And at that meeting, we solved any problems that there were with people. We talked about whatever was going on. We had agreements about how you deal with children. Nobody hits anybody else's children. We had, kind of educational whatever we were doing. We also had a big library. We had an impressive library. So when officials would get uptight about us not homeschooling our kids, all we had to do was show them the library, and they backed right off, because it's like, oh my God, we don't have this many books in the school. So, so they let us alone. And so that's how it was run. It was democratic, if most people wanted it, we voted on it. And, we did little rituals to make the group together. We have these, our philosophy is, and peaceful and cooperative and democratic and hardworking. It was like, okay, what are we building next? We built a lot, to house that many people. And do trades for hay for the animals, or, that kind of stuff. The family wash, holy mackerel, that was formidable. With that many people. We also had a banya. We had a A-frame banya, the Russian word, it's a steam bath. So you have a big wood stove, and then on top of it are rocks, and then big tubs for hot water. And so you would, once a week, there was a big banya, a big wash. And then leading up to that, well, it was a wash day too. There were big wash tubs out there. I made soap, learned how to make soap out of tallow and ash, and a washboard, and you could wash that way. Labor intensive. We also took our wash to the Pink Maid Laundry mat in Nelson, which was so wonderful. And it was a meeting place for people, and wonderful Mr. Coletti was nice to us. He was a sweet man. And so, strange hippie-looking people would drag their laundry, and there was piles of laundry everywhere, and people would go in and brush their teeth in the bathroom, and, all those kinds of things. So that's kind of what it was like.
I can remember going to a restaurant, cafe, having a cup of coffee, going into the bathroom, turning the hot water on, and just having my hands under it.
Just to get warm.
That was ecstasy. That was just, no, that's all. Just warm water running out of a tap. A miracle?
Yes.
When did they invent this?
No hot water, no electricity. I mean,
No.
Yeah. No, it was wonderful. But quiet and peaceful, because no hum.
Well, for me, after the horrible experience in America, of the war, and seeing that the war was related to economy, just about the time that Vietnam just hit, absolute bloodbath, the sizes of the shelves in the stores grew another 2 feet at the top. So the shelves used to be like this, and then suddenly they were like this. And suddenly there were disposable lighters at the counter, and there was too much junk in the dumps. It was like, what the hell? Is this what I want to participate in? No. And it, like the world didn't make any sense. I didn't want to be part of that. I could see that there was a relationship. There was a very wonderful cartoon in, what was that? There was the Whole Earth catalog, and then there were the Georgia Strait. There were those kinds of newspapers that were anti-war. And there was a wonderful cartoon of this mindless kind of lady pushing her shopping cart, and at the side of the shopping cart was a meat grinder, and young soldiers were being put in the meat grinder, and then appliances and cereals and food, and no, I'm not gonna do that. That is wrong. I'm looking for another way. So that's what we were looking for, another way. We shouldn't be doing this. There has to be another way to do it. So that's what I was thinking.
And there were a big element of that was Canada too. You know, I mean, I know.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Also, when I was growing up, I wanted to be an American. All the time. When I went to university, I still wanted to be an American. I applied to 7 graduate schools. None of them were in Canada. You know, and it was all part of the same military-industrial complex. Yeah. Canada was a part of that too. We were the same country, and then all of a sudden, my dream of being an American became a nightmare.
Yeah,
and it was like, whoa! And it was university for me, learning what I thought. Oh, great! Kennedy got us into Vietnam. We're going to keep the Chinese. You know, this is going to be good. And then it was like, it was such a huge learning experience of everything that you loved was bad. Wrong. Oh, dear.
So we have to do it.
And then we came here and we loved each other.
Way.
Because we were each other's world. And we
family.
had left families. We had left another place. Yeah.
That's why this community is so tight, you know. Mm-hmm. We were family to one another. Mm-hmm. We understood one another, where our own families thought we were nuts.
Yeah.
My family maintained love. Not all families did. You know, some people were disowned. You know, my family was split right down the middle of whether Vietnam was a good idea or a bad idea. Mm-hmm. But my loving parents said, okay, well, we'll agree to disagree then. But we will still be family, no matter what. Makes me cry, so. But it was that bad.
It
was hard.
Yeah. And what about you, Brian? What about your family? Did they think about you coming to Spokane?
You know, I was the first person in my family who had ever gone to university.
And that's another part of it.
And it created big problems because I was learning stuff. I could no longer talk to my family. Like, we'd go and have dinner and conversation, you know, I just, it ended badly. It started ending badly all the time, where there hadn't been disharmony before. So, yeah, it was tough. That part of it was tough. It was like being intellectual and being with people who weren't, and not understanding that. Just not understanding that. I mean, that was what was going on. But at the time, I didn't really get it, you know? Yeah. But kids changed it all. When the babies came, then the parents were like, oh, well, okay.
Grandchildren, eh?
Yeah.
Grandchildren.
Grandchildren,
Yeah, right.
absolutely.
Okay.
Grandchildren.
We can get along.
Yeah. And you know, the SUVs would pour into the Slocan Valley in the spring of the families coming to visit. You know, that became a thing, you know. So it all evened out over the years. But initially, big, like Vietnam really caused big problems internally in families, really. Yeah. And some of us saw it as evil, and others didn't. And that's a big gulf, a misunderstanding about evil. Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'm going to move on. I'm going to ask about the connections you had with people and places outside the commune. We talked a little bit about this, I suppose, but a bit more perhaps. Maybe we can get some more. Did you have any strong connection with people from other communes and other back to land settlements and other members of the counterculture? Or did you have strong connections as well with people outside of the counterculture movement as well? How was your relationship to these people?
I don't think I would have survived if it hadn't been for, it wasn't the ashram, but I was interested in spiritual things, and I was throwing my life to the winds, and I didn't have family here, so you look for family. The commune I joined was called the New Family. So, and my mother was very offended by that. I didn't hear about that till later. I
never thought of that.
It never occurred to me that it would hurt her, but it did. So anyway, so in order to deal with the challenges of living communally with other people and sharing your children, which was really hard, I sought meditation and spiritual points of view, spiritual psychology. There was no psychology at that point. It's the other thing. This generation doesn't know that psychology was still kind of spooky, and the whole thing about communications. I remember when the first books arrived about communications. We have to study communications. We have to learn how to talk. Nobody knew how to talk to one another. Nobody really understood what psychology was and how we bumped up against one another and how we can solve those problems. That's all new stuff. To say nothing of the women's movement, which came later. But, so anyway, I didn't go actually to the ashram, but there was a fellow named Swami Joe who had been an acolyte of Swami Radha. Swami Radha was the first woman to be initiated into the Swami order. She was very powerful and kind woman, actually. She told us how to get here. But they were practicing brahmacharya, which means no sex. Well, my goodness, we were 25 years old and healthy. So most people were not going to go to the ashram and live there and have no sex. So Swami Joe was a very wonderful, spiritual, intelligent guy, and he had a lady friend. And so they had a place there in Ryandale. So every 2 weeks we would go visit Swami Joe and do satsang. And satsang is you do chanting, and you'd have a little kind of spiritual sermon, and you sit together and calm down and talk about the good stuff and how to deal with problems in a sane and loving way. I would not have survived if I didn't do that regularly, because I needed it. There was just so much tumult and so much change. And so that was great. We were called the God Squad. So the God Squad would pile up into the car and drive, all the way there and go across the ferry. And, it was a nice outing. Saved my bacon. So that was my big outside the commune thing. And then eventually there was the whole school and building the Balagan Hole. That was contact with and there were some wonderful barn dances and that kind of stuff. So that's what I remember. Oh, and then you was food exchanges or that kind of stuff, Mm-hmm. The beginning of the Nelson Co-op was here, was big bulk buying. There was bulk buying by people. Would find out where you get the cheapest bag of whatever.
Well, also the Doukhobors store in Slowcamp Park. We were buying whole cheeses. And,
that's right. Yes,
you know,
and meeting at
shopping
people's
differently,
houses and
you know.
and dividing up. How could
Yeah.
we get? Because we were all poor, so
Yeah.
how can we get the most amount of food for the cheapest if we buy bulk? That sort of thing. That puts you in communication with one another.
Right. I didn't have the spiritual connection. Just a lack. But
Not for everybody,
for me, I know. But for me, it was working with people in a way I'd never worked with people before, and building the Vatican Hole, which that was my thing. But equally we started a school. And I remember countless meetings of us all sitting around a table going, okay, so what kind of a school is it going to be? And people from New York, people from LA, people from this background, that background, and oh my goodness, So it was so exciting to think that we were going to be responsible for our children's education, not send them to some government organized thing. And we learned so much about each other and how to work and how to create our new institutions and the Rural Alternative Research and Training Society, the building, the group, and the whole school. Were two big, strong organizations that every once in a while bumped into each other. A lot of us were in both, so, we worked that out. But that was wonderful for me. I mean, without, the spiritual base, this was very practical, very philosophical, too. Because we really were, even with the Rural Alternative and Research Training Society, we were very involved in, in philosophy and how are we going to live and what's a good way to live and, what do we want to change and, So that was rich.
Your
that was
children
very rich.
well,
yeah.
and they will something or other.
And I mean, we talked about the women's movement. There's also the sexual liberation. And we had a different way of looking at relationships and where back in Victoria, if you had like an affair, it was a scandal and oh my God, things would happen. Not that I was a part of it, anyway, but this, in the Valley, it was the opposite. It was like, what's wrong with you if you're not having another relationship?
Not everybody
but people were not critical of you. Like you could have other relationships. You could turn up with someone else, or you could do something else with and it was all in the open, and it was all wonderful. Like that was amazing to me. And we had therapy in those days, working out relationships between 4 different people. So we went at it deliberately. It wasn't sleazy. It was philosophically kind of pure.
I had a guy, before we came here, we had, my first husband and I had dropped out to a place in Oregon. And it was there were hippies there. And rednecks, some rednecks didn't like that. And they drove by in their pickup trucks with guns in the back. So that got scary. And actually some drunk ones fired at us. And then one afternoon, this guy was driving there, and it's like, uh-oh, here we go. So, and he stopped, and he said, can I talk to you? And I said, maybe. And so he said, I want to talk to you about something that really bothers me. Okay. He said, well, I wonder about this, people with different partners and stuff. And I said, yeah, that goes on. And he said, well, where I'm from, they have these parties and they all put their keys in a bowl at the party. These are regular, we use the word straight. These are regular straight people and they swap wives. How is that different than whatever hippies are doing? So there isn't any difference, except this is more honest, or isn't it? Or everybody, the pill had happened. The pill had arrived. That changes everything. And then very quickly after that, it also changes women. The women's movement started after that. If I don't have to be barefoot and pregnant, then what am I? And I am an equal. And if I'm an equal, then there's going to be headbutting. It's like, I'm not doing that anymore. I want to do it differently. So
there's so much going on.
yeah, you see
so much
the pressures
letting go
of everything.
Sometimes you would feel like, oh my God,
Yeah.
there's nothing to hold on to.
That's
but then
right.
you would find something, and the community. I think that was one of the reasons why we were so close to each other.
Yes.
It's like we were protecting this fragile and scary new life that we were having. Like trying to figure out male-female relationship, where like all of a sudden the rule book was gone.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And what do
means-
kids mean? And how do we do all these things? And
And really empowering people as individuals. Because though those people over there want to do it this way, it's like, no, it's not my cup of tea. I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do my way. That doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
So self-empowerment, personal empowerment.
yeah, absolutely.
And
Empowerment is huge.
And then helping your children find that. Providing a school where the trees aren't always green and brown. They're, blah, 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 blah. It just goes on and on, so.
I can see the women's movement seems to really come out of this in
Yes.
the Kootenays, and
Yes.
Right.
we have
Yes.
the women's centre develops into Nelson and other areas, but I think from what I can gather, it seems to come very much out of this.
Yep.
Well, and I think, and it's interesting, as I then I was very interested in this country I'd arrived in. It's like this country has a history that isn't necessarily the same as what I was born into. And that Nellie McClung and all those women came out of the farming community of Saskatchewan. And here we were, all these hippie ladies are building houses, wielding chainsaws. We did heavy work. We worked hard, and you're not going to
Tree planting,
You're
forest
not going to tell
firefighting.
me what to do when I can do it myself.
Right.
And I'm not going to put up with any of this you rule me business anymore.
Right. My wife went tree planting.
Yeah.
I didn't.
So we became.
I thought that was very liberating.
We became a big voice
Yeah.
here. Yeah. So interesting how that.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Okay, and we talked a little bit about this. Did you have any dealings with the D Squad or FBI undercover agents?
We did. Every year, the D Squad made a pilgrimage, or they came up every year. They came up in the summer. It had to be warm enough so that the women weren't wearing clothes. So that was part of it. The head of the D Squad was showing us off to his younger minions. And the one rule that we had, because, we were still immigrants. We did not want any trouble with the law because we get thrown out of the country. So when they came to the bottom of our land, and I don't know, somehow, I think the kids maybe, have the cops are here or something, so it's like, so then we would meet them, and they had guns. They were carrying guns. We allowed no guns on the property. So that was the deal. We had negotiated. You can come on the property, but don't bring your guns. So it's like, we're not being cowed by you. This is where we live, and this is how we live. You can come, yes. So they did. So they wandered around, and you could see their eyeballs doing this. It's like, yes, I have a body, and this is what it looks like. And there we go.
Uppity immigrants. We're used to, people who are quiet
That's
and
right.
keep to themselves. These were not that kind of immigrants.
So, yeah.
Yep. And I loved it. If I did feel nationalistically confused, as I was, but.
No, it's interesting. I mean, there's even books on FBI agents coming around and investigating, and yes, links to Sons of Freedoms members who may have been involved in attacks, but I haven't seen any evidence of any allegiance that I know of,
Yeah.
and I don't think even in the books where it's been written, they haven't found any connection at all.
No.
I mean, you're pacifist people.
No. No, we walked into the middle of, or near the end of the big Doukhobor conflict.
That's right.
So, I mean, if we had come at a different time, it probably would have been different. But where we lived in Goose Creek in Christova was the new settlement. The new settlement, Sons of Freedom Doukhobors, were all out of the penitentiary. They had all been in jail for long periods of time, and they were reconnecting with the world. And these were my friends who were Doukhobors. And they were my age, and they had grown up in a stockade in New Denver, right? They had not grown up with their families. They had been taken away from their families. My age, like that's our generation, you know? So they were very interesting, I thought, and I really looked up to them as people that had really put it on the line more than I ever had. Like they had fought hard for who they were and paid big prices for who they were and loved us, saw us as friends somehow, you know? But they had a prophecy back around the turn of the century, the other century, that their lands and their way of life would be taken over by long-haired, bearded people in the 60s. This was an actual recorded prophecy. Peter, whatever, the Lord.
Verrigan.
Peter Verrigan, yeah. So, oh my God, here we were. And we were like, whoa, that's freaky, but cool. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to dive a little bit more about the Valley Hole Community Centre, which I think you both got connections with there. Can you tell us about the project to build the community centre and the reasons behind it, and also how it, I think you talked a little bit about this, how it brought people together and that sort of aspect?
It was wonderful the way it was built. Really brought people together because you could still probably find boards where on the right hand of the board there are two neat nail holes, and on the left hand of the board there's like 18 nails all bent over, you know? So you can see very easily the difference in ability of people, work crews, and the work crews always were varied, you know, there were lots of different people. So that whole long process of building, just every day we did it, brought us closer together. I think created the community. We created ourselves, really, in building this building. And we started building it because of the opposition from the other side. Like we couldn't use
They
their
wouldn't
halls.
let us use anybody. No, we couldn't use other people's community halls or their cemeteries.
Right, so we had
We
to...
have our own cemetery.
Yeah, that's a big deal too.
So the
sure.
exclusion from the other,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, well, okay, you guys, what are we going to do? We need a meeting place and we need a burying place. So
Right.
that's
We
a
also
big one.
didn't want to send our kids to the public school. The public schools in the valley had a really bad reputation at that point too, in terms of like rural, out there, forgotten, you know, education, still run out of Victoria by conservative governments, you know. And that was a big struggle. We were at many Nelson School Board meetings. Got to know the Nelson School Board. I addressed the Nelson School Board about the Valley Hole and what we were trying to do and our school and how could we work together. And actually, it worked out really well. I mean, initially it was very difficult, but I think maybe, you know, enlightened people in Nelson just kind of eased that process. I think they saw something, even though they weren't coming out to us in terms of being supported particularly. But things got easy all of a sudden. And it looked like, okay, we built the building. Okay, well, now we have teachers. Oh, let's look at the qualifications of the teachers. We have 3 PhDs and 4 master's degrees. And so, you know, we had the credits, you know. We had the best school in Canada, probably,
Well,
in terms of the qualifications, you know. So that was huge. That was huge. And then we taught. We all taught. All of us taught in the school at different times, you know. And that was big. That was also big. And learning from each other's kids and watching the beautiful children grow up and, you know. Yeah, that was huge. That was huge. And you know, eventually us doing theater, which came a little later, but was incredibly exciting, you know.
You have there's the Goat Mountain Churches School that I know as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see legacy, a lot of impact on schooling in the area. Really,
that's right. It starts with
the
kids.
It was a big, important issue,
Yeah.
and also one that really connected us. You know, I think we understood. We all understood. Wherever we were from, we kind of understood that we don't want to recreate the school system. We want to make it different.
And there were people got beat up and stuff like that. You know? So if your kids went to the regular school, there was a chance they'd be beat up because they were hippie kids.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay.
Oh, there are horrific things that happened.
Yeah, there were.
The
Got
gay
beat up
bashing
and hurt
was awful.
Well,
you
and
know,
you know,
all of that. And the fear. You could kind of get it. Why these people were afraid of us.
Yeah.
They have TVs, and TVs are full of long-haired people who are doing drugs all the time, and so that's what they've got, you know? Like, they don't want their children to be affected by this.
well, and the I can't remember. It was the FBI, I guess, came up and met with the police and the RCMP and stuff told what dangerous people we were. So a certain segment of the society had been primed by those people to look at us very suspiciously. Yeah. We were dangerous because we had come from a protest kind of situation against the war and against the universities participating in the war and stuff. So we were potential threats to civil
and probably communist
civility. Yeah, that's right. Socialist, communist, blah blah blah.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
it was quite a conservative place.
Exactly, it
in
was.
the early '60s, and then I know there was quite a bit of opposition for some of the politicians were not pleased to see this influx coming in.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right, and that was the situation, and so no wonder we kind of flocked together. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like there was protection in numbers. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, brilliant. So we talked a little bit about spiritualism, which is great, and daily life. So that's pretty good. The environmental movement, I think, is another possible aspect that really has been affected by the counterculture and environmental protest, certainly. Were you involved with these aspects?
I think we all were. One of the big disputes early on was putting big hydro lines through the Slocan Valley. And we had public meetings, and flat catchers from BC Hydro would come out and talk, and then that was another way of learning about ourselves, because very articulate people would stand up and say this is, and you go, oh, that's cool, and this, these people knew this, and we had the Berkeley radical people, and later we were very involved with mining for uranium, because there's a lot of uranium in this whole area, and that was very dangerous, because if you prospect for uranium, you're opening it up. So this was dangerous, and we had a embargo, not an embargo, but what do you do when you
boycott?
No, legal
demonstration?
thing. There was a injunction. Mm-hmm. We got an injunction to stop it, and then there were hearings, and we went to the hearings all of that, and we overturned that. We did stop, so we had successes too, and then of course forestry has always been a big issue and always will be a big issue until all the trees are gone.
The other thing was that the railroad wanted to spray DDT on the rail line. Well, whoa, there was a huge demonstration about that, and we stopped it. We did not allow them to spray DDT on the rail line, which drains into the river. I mean, it's like, hey.
So I think after a while what happened is like, we got good at fighting these things. And then I think people started thinking, oh, well, we're not going to try and do that because they'll do this. So I think it kind of had a cumulative effect. It was good. It was good.
Yeah, I know in the Welcome to Resistorville book, it talks a little bit about this and the fact that there were protests in the Slocan Valley, but these companies were able to get away with it in Castlegar and the cities and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. What was your favourite thing about those times? Is there anything you miss about living in a communal setting?
Dancing. We had fabulous dances.
We had wonderful dances.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Brain Damage would play, or, somebody else would come in and play.
Great community.
And we were sweaty and hot and colorful. And
the kids were everywhere.
The kids were everywhere running around. And that's when I felt, I love this place. I love this place.
Well, all those buildings and stuff, like the Hole and like the school and all that stuff, they needed to be financed.
Yep.
So they were big fundraising dances.
It was fundraising.
It was
that was the engine
so,
that drove it.
That's right. Women baked cakes and pies and stuff. We auctioned off cakes and pies and square danced and rock and rolled until we dropped.
And when we were building the Vatican Hole, and we had some crunches where we were wondering how can we ever get money. And actually, I will take this. I did something that was good. It came to me sitting in a finance meeting at the Vatican Hall with 2 future cabinet ministers, as it turned out. But so I was sitting in the back, and I went. They were talking about Madison Avenue and New York and stuff like that, and I went, we could sell shares.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, what? What is that? And I said, well, let's print up shares. And we'll sell them. So we had an early printing press, the pigweed press.
Pigweed press. We had
so
our
they
press
were
here.
there, and they made these beautiful share. They made them like regular stock.
With a picture of the Vatican Hole.
Picture of the Vatican Hole,
which
on
had
it.
become an emblem now.
So we got thousands of these printed, and they went all over North America. And then the families came through, and the money poured in. We made thousands and thousands. That was the biggest single fundraiser for the Vatican Hall. And it gave my family, everybody's family, a chance to contribute to the children. So it was full, and it didn't cost a cent.
When we printed up these cute little shares.
Yeah.
We'll find some share certificates. That'd be cool.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Marcia may have some.
Yeah, there's got to be some around.
Marcia, if she
somewhere.
doesn't have them, she'll know where they are.
Yeah. Contact with Monica and Will Carpendale.
Yes.
So,
right.
Rolling again.
Okay, so I've just got a couple more questions. I'm going to get on to Theatre Energy here. But how do you think living on a intentional community setting and being part of the counterculture movement really has affected your life?
Wow.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
One of the things that I remember when you come from, I grew up in the 50s, so that's how the structured, kind of world of the 50s. And then, I remember the first time I swam with other people nude. I was really frightened by that. And then I did it, and it's like, oh, people can behave civilly with no clothes on. It's like, oh, that was a learning experience. And then, on and on. It's like learning to trust other people, learning to interact with other people in a trusting way.
Give and take, too.
Yeah.
Like giving to other people, taking from them. I mean, we did that a lot more than I think I did in my previous world in Victoria. Yeah. It's also very powerful being part of an identified visual minority, which, look at me, I mean, I'm not, right?
Yes.
We're not.
Yeah.
But we were. So
right.
To me, I've always made this connection in my mind. In the 50s, when we were growing up, was the racism.
Yes.
It was that's what the world was all about then. It was demonstrations, and it was about black people rising up and taking power themselves and all of that. And I think the reason we grew our hair was so that we would be looked at differently. And it was true. If I'm driving my car in Victoria, I would get stopped. And they would get me out of the car. I would put my hands up. They would shake me down. Well, that was only because of the way I looked.
That's right.
But for black people, they couldn't cut their hair. So I think that was very big for me in the 50s was racism and racism being a big problem. And growing up in Victoria, like on the TV and everything, with Martin Luther King and everything, it was very clear. In Victoria, it was incredibly racist and always had been. Only it was South Asians and Chinese people. We didn't have any black people at all. We had one black family, and he drove a school bus, So we all knew where he was all the time, But yeah, big change that way. And the counterculture was like we were like black people in a white world. We were different. We looked different. We paid the price, and we got the bonus, But that was our world.
Yeah. To be discriminated against, to be hated just because of how you wore your hair, let alone the color of your skin.
I know, like about the Beatles. I mean, people talk about the Beatle haircut, like, oh, it's outrageous.
Can you imagine? Yes, exactly. So we have moved from the Beatle haircut to
God is dead. John Lennon.
I mean, we had a lot to move through, and we did it piece by piece. And to walk in an anti-war demonstration and have people spit at you and hate you, I never experienced that, but it happened. And people did feel strongly. So that, again, goes back to feeling protected in a group. Because people did hate you and did fire guns at you.
Late at night, I got chased in a small town by like 5 or 6 guys.
Yeah.
I got away from them, but there was no doubt as to what was going to happen, And they were like, fuck, hippie, and yeah. So, that was, in a weird way, validating,
Very educational.
Well, it also was something to be kind of proud of. Like, I never felt bad about looking like a hippie. I felt proud of looking like a hippie because I was making a statement. Well, I'm the same as you. I just look different. Don't be racist.
Don't discriminate.
And Canada was very racist. Like, we had the United States. We've always looked at the United States and gone, oh, they're bad. But really, you didn't have to uncover very much in Canada to find the same attitudes. But not a big black population. Just a little Chinese population and,
And of course, we had the Japanese internment in the Second World War.
Well, yes. That's a huge part of our history as well. And the Japanese people were here, and our work with Theatre Energy, we were very aware of that community, the Doukhobors, the Japanese,
and the First Nations, of course, as well.
No, I grew up with the First Nations. I grew up in Vancouver Island. They were everywhere. There weren't any here. I said, after a year or so, I said, I've never seen an Indigenous person. They left.
Well, they got trapped on the other side of the line, and then they got called extinct.
They were migratory, and they got stuck down in Washington. So there were Indigenous people here, but not when we were here, So that was not part of our world. I don't think I ever saw an Indigenous person.
You saw them in the Okanagan.
Yeah, you didn't, or maybe these couldn't too, but not here.
No.
Not here. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Is there anything you think that wider society can learn from communal living?
The wider society can learn from communal living? How to share and how to get along? That'd be a good start.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard for people to share.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We don't have a
and
lot
status in my family was in what you had, what kind of a car you drove, what your house was like, what kind of a cabinet your records played in,
Materialism.
Furniture.
Materialism, yeah.
Oh, my family was so materialistic, and it made me ill, and I was so glad to get away from all of that, and that's huge here. No, people were not. Going back to Christmas time, in my family on Vancouver Island, was a nightmare because it was all about materialism and we had no money. Like we were, as I said to myself, vicariously poor. Like, we didn't really have to be poor. I had a university degree. I could be out doing stuff. It was a way, it was a gain. It was a decision. Like having long hair and looking different. It was like not being part of the economy. You know, I was very, very opposed to materialism. That was my own personal thing that I think was, you know, big with me. So, you know, being in a communal situation like they were, less so with us, I think, was what you need to survive. There was no ostentatious materialism. Nobody looked at your pickup truck and went, "Oh, I wish I had a pickup truck like that," you know.
And I could see allegiances there, of course, in ethos with the Doukhobors and the Quakers.
Absolutely,
there.
absolutely. The Doukhobors were very unmaterialistic, although they, you know, the Orthodox were changing, you know, and becoming more middle class all the time, and you know, but they had a history that was very strong, non-materialistic.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, I'm going to talk about Theatre Energy now. What was the motivation and the ethos for creating Theatre Energy? How did it start?
Nancy and I were both really important beginnings, and we're both directors. That's what we had in common.
We both had university theater backgrounds.
We acted as well, but primarily our focus was being directing. So Nancy directed
The Doll's House.
The Doll's House, which I went. I don't think we'd even met.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think I went and I saw this play being done, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, you know. And I did Kurt Vonnegut play that people wanted. Kurt Vonnegut was a big person in the hippie movement, and so this play, like, people wanted. So I directed that play and did another play. Nancy did an amazing readers theater that was incredibly powerful theater. All of this got a lot of people involved. And the thing that people would say about the Slocan Valley, Valhalla Rangers, all of this is what a lot of theater energy there is. And that's how the name came. We were like, okay, well, we know what to call ourselves, Theatre Energy Performing Ensemble. And we kept directing plays, and I got really bored, partly because I did theater at UVic. I didn't want to do that kind of theater. I was excited about making our own theater, and I think that was a counterculture aspect that was in all of the arts. It was like throwing off the shackles and going, okay, we want to do this. We want to make our own plays. And it was hard, and we had wonderful resource people in Ronnie Gilbert and Buzz Bentz, who both came in with a lot of experience and helped us get braver. And then there were 8 of us, and the miracle of Theatre Energy to me still is that we stayed together for 4 years, and we worked professionally. We were really fortunate to get a pile of money in our first year. Like a lot of money. We were able to employ ourselves for months and months and months. And that, you know, times got even harder after that, but we still had that feeling of working together, going in the morning, leaving at night, Monday through Friday, and then hotels, and it was so much fun. It was so much fun. Hot running water. Yeah, I could go just, you know, I'd stay there for hours, you know.
Well, the other thing, we had talked about this earlier because we knew we were going to be part of this. And so there was no Canadian theater. You did American theater or British theater. That's all there was. And just what began to happen at that time was Pierre Elliott Trudeau said, we need a culture, and started dumping money into culture. So that was the beginning of the LIP, OFY, explorations, grants, Canada Council. Come on, you guys, make some theater for us. And that's what we were doing. And for me as an immigrant, it's like, why isn't there any Canadian theater? I want to know about this country, and nobody's written anything. You know, I mean, you had to, so in some of most of the early shows that we did were history based. We did research. So we would find old journals of prospectors, you know, and then turn those pieces into Three-Fingered Frank. It was a wonderful theater piece that this guy had written about a story that the prospectors would tell in the bars. And then, you know, it goes on and on. The Doukhobors, we interviewed Doukhobors, we turned that into a scene.
I think the thing that was really important was the first play that we did was rendering, and it was our story. So we went and we worked, and we had not a long period of time. I think we had a month or 5 weeks, 3 weeks.
Yeah,
I don't know what it was. But
yeah.
we had Canada Council money. We had a project.
Explorations grant.
Thanks to Nancy and Buzz and other people. And I could leave the job on the green chain at the sawmill and become an actor. And we created these, to me, you know, my own personal feeling, but this was the best work that we did in a way, because then we started doing other people's stories. But our own stories had a lot of resonating. Anyway.
They resonated.
They resonated, yeah. And they meant something to our community, because
Yes.
we were showing our community,
Yes.
and the older community. So we would do question and answer, and I did a scene about pulling boards on the green chain, right? And I had the apron, and I had the physical movement and the whole thing. And I had older men, you know, come up from the other community after the play and go, I never thought I would see that job on stage. Like, oh, you know, they were so excited that their lives had focus. You know?
Canadian theater.
Canadian
There
theater.
it was.
So this is, and it was happening all across the country. Edmonton was fabulous. I'm trying to remember the names of those companies. Catalyst Theater in Edmonton, same sort of thing that we were doing. And they went to New York, and they played off-Broadway for like 2 months, and they got worldwide notice. And they were doing stuff that we were doing. It was all about our lives, you know?
You know, in the East, you know,
Yep.
about the farm communities.
Yeah, they did the farm
Telling
show.
their stories.
And yeah, all of it. So
There's
it
a
was,
lot of that.
we were part of a bigger
Codco.
world that we didn't even know about. You know, I would go doing business stuff more, but I would go to the big meat market, the big conferences in Vancouver, where all the performing artists would come, right? And I would be meeting people that were doing what we were doing. It was so exciting. And we had the same connection that what we're talking about the hippie community had, the theater community had. So really, this was a big renaissance in Canadian theater, and it was very, very welded to the back to the land counterculture. We were that. The whole theater was that. Whether it was in Toronto or Montreal or Edmonton or Vancouver, it was so wonderful to be part of something like that was new and shiny and bright and honest and true. It wasn't entertainment as we were used to. It was meaningful. Like, if nothing else, it was meaningful, you know.
And it had an audience. You know, people wanted to see it.
Where did you do these performances then?
When did you say
No,
when?
Where?
We started in
Vatican
the
Hall?
West Kootenays. Well, we the first times were like at the Vatican Hall and Nelson and New Denver. I think those were like the three. And then we would add Caslow, we would add Grand Forks, we would add. So we were making our tours. We were going Spokane. We were in Kelowna. We were in Vancouver. We did runs in theaters in Vancouver. So we gradually worked up more and more. And as we got confidence, as we learned more about the industry and how to make it happen, we were doing longer tours, and it was amazing. It just kept going. Like, it seemed in those days there could be no end to this, you know. I mean, every year we added so much. You know?
There were festivals too. The first women's festival in Canada was up in the Okanagan, one of those high places up in the Okanagan, and that's where I did Women's Readers Theatre. So that was a venue for that. Very popular. Very popular.
Powerful theater.
Yeah, it was.
Very,
It
very
is.
powerful.
There's being a renaissance in theater in the Valley right now. There's going to be a come together of all the theater people. and because people want theater, but it's hard to do. I mean, it takes a lot of coordination. It takes good script and blah, 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 blah. But one of the things I'm going to suggest is that we put Readers Theatre up because we can get stuff going. And the Readers Theatre that I created then had a purpose. It was about women. It's like, okay, there are women's stories, and here they are, you know, and you don't have to, you know, have a graduate degree in theater to do it. Sit on this stool and tell the story. Tell it to the audience. Don't tell it to one another. And, you know, so that's a quick and easy way to start. And then you find out who is hardcore and you do something else, you know, put people together. But it's a way people can learn. So that's happening again now here. So
I have been so impressed by what I've seen since I've been back. Fantastic stuff. Dance and theater in Nelson at the Capitol.
At the Capitol.
And I go, oh my God, are these local people? These are local people. So
yeah,
it's alive and well. You know, there's wonderful work being done here now. That's such high quality artistically. It's really wonderful to see. Yeah.
No, obviously the Capitol Theatre. That it was reopened in the 80s there, and has developed this program, and it's great to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And they've got a good scout who brings good stuff, really interesting stuff.
You know, that's an interesting thing, because it's true. I really admire the work they're doing. But what's interesting is when we were starting to do our theater, I would go into Nelson and I would realize that there was a guy in the high school who was bringing in 4 modern dance companies a year and selling out. Mm-hmm. And that was happening in Trail. So there was already an artistic community that didn't want to have anything to do with us. They wanted professional companies from Toronto, and they didn't want to talk to me. They didn't want to talk to us at all. And so we were almost in opposition. Sometimes we would run against them. And that gradually changed.
Yeah.
It took a while,
Yeah.
and it happened in Trail. They had a concert series, and they paid a lot of money for these companies to come in. So I'm going, pay us a lot of money to perform for you. And it took 2 years before they would. And then it worked so well. Like, we had great performances, and we were part of the companies that were, okay, you are professional. Whoa! Nobody.
Where did you perform in Nelson?
Where?
Yeah.
We performed at DTUC, the Black Box Theater, which I still love. You know, I always loved that theater. Yeah. Yeah, that was all in Nelson. I think the only place we performed in Nelson, I think.
Oh, yeah, no, we didn't. We didn't perform at the Civic. There were.
And we didn't. The Capitol wasn't up and running yet.
It wasn't fixed. You know.
It was going to be, and it was being developed. We were part of that too in the initial stages. But yeah.
Okay.
But I think the point there is there's something special about Nelson that goes way back
there
in
always
time.
Has been. Yeah.
Boris Karloff got his start, on the
very-
Nelson stage. So Nelson has this, whatever it came from, I don't know,
it
but
has
they
an
have a
arts
performing
community.
arts kind of
Yeah.
background.
Queen City of the Kootenays.
Yeah,
It was
cultural center of the
lots
interior,
of music,
It had an opera house going way back.
That's
Oh,
right.
yeah,
Exactly,
And there was
exactly.
quite a tradition.
1,400 seat, gas lit, which is why it's gone. All those theaters, there were big theaters in all of the cities. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about some of this. So, and how strong was the connection between Theatre Energy and local communes? Did you ever perform at a commune? Does any chance?
Well, you know, Tamanous is a very wonderful, powerful theater company in the Lower Mainland, and we became friends with them. One of our members, Buzz Benz, was part of Tamanous. He lived there, and he built a summer home in Bonington, Beasley. Blew it. Thank you. One of those B places, So he was very helpful. Selkirk brought Tamanous out to do a couple of their plays at Selkirk, and we went and we made the connection, and then we would go there to see their shows. They would, he would see our stuff. He started working with us, and he was very much a part. It was he and I who wrote the first grant to found Theatre Energy as a professional company. What was the question again? So so at one point, Tamanous was working on one of their shows, and they came and stayed with me at our old commune. So they stayed in our houses and cooked and created a whole play up at the new Family Commune when Eric and Carol were gone someplace. So it was like my place. It's like, okay. Then I got to watch them work, which was so wonderful. Because all their stuff was from improv, and they were brilliant, and so it was great company.
The year before Theatre Energy started, I drove the mail truck from Nelson to Vancouver every day, back and forth. And I went to Tamanous, and I said, so I'm going to be here mornings, because I left Vancouver at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to drive back to Nelson. And they were wonderful to me and invited me. So I was in their rehearsals for that most of that winter, and I saw all kinds of shows being put together, and they would always, they were just great people, and they would come back all the time to me and say, what'd you think about that? What would you do? How would this change? And it just made me a part of the process, and they were like that, and that's something that really accelerated our development as a company. They were wonderful people. And I brought them back when I did the summer school in David Thompson, and they would come back and do resident, some of them. And it was a wonderful connection, as Nancy said. It was great.
Because you were doing workshops as well.
Oh, yeah.
We did. We went to, I heard there was someone new appointed in Selkirk College, an extension services director. Nobody really knew what that was. So I made an appointment with him, went and sat down, and I said, okay, we do a theater thing here and I need money. Have you got money? And so I walked out with $19,000. And what that was where we would normally tour, he was paying us to do classes. So we weren't doing anything more than we were doing before, and got a big grant from Selkirk College, which is not allowed to grant. So things like that would happen. Yeah. And teaching in different places gave us a lot of wonderful connections.
Mentorships in schools.
Yeah. Teaching was big part of our company, really, doing workshops. Yeah.
Yeah. I did 3 mentorships down at the elementary school here. Children's plays involving children stuff. So we have generations of kids, that we brought up. We're now working with the next generation to get it going again. Martina, that's right. Yeah.
One of the most active people now was part of you at Winlaw School, when she was, and went to UVic and did a theater degree and came back and teaches at Mount Sentinel and does community theater and is wanting to do more professional theater and is growing and developing, and it just makes you want to cry. It's wonderful. It's beautiful to watch.
Yeah. Awesome. The continuum. Mm-hmm. It's very rewarding.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add?
I want to say one thing about Theatre Energy and my own future, because I went to Toronto and worked for the Harbourfront Corporation, and then in the 90s, I guess, did a festival called Summerworks Festival, and it had 40 companies doing 200 performances in theaters in August, which was the dark time in Toronto. So the wonderful thing about that is the connection to Theatre Energy. Because these were young people getting together, writing a play, putting it on. And it was us. It was the counterculture. There's not a lot of counterculture in Toronto. I never really saw a full bore hippie while I was there. Like you would see in Winlaw any day.
They can't expect to live. They can't pay to live there.
Yeah, whatever. And, my hair was not long, when I was there. And I did wear a tie and all of that, But that was wonderful because it was people telling their own story. And we were helping, create an environment that was very, very much like Theatre Energy in the 70s.
Well, it's great that you were able to bring those stories to people. And
also fringe theatre, which the Edmonton Fringe is like a huge event. That came out of the period we're talking about.
Yeah, that's right.
It was all over Canada, this theatre renaissance that was so wonderful. Like as Nancy said, there was no theatre.
There was no Canadian theatre. So
No.
it's like, what is the Canadian theatre?
would
What is this Canadian story? For heaven's sakes.
Let's do a play. Which George Bernard Shaw play shall we do? No, we did that one.
My Fair Lady again?
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, that's great. Try to get those stories matter. And
absolutely.
as we know, so it's
That's what you're doing right now.
well,
You're telling stories.
about local history, Canadian history here.
That's
So we're trying to show these stories, and we know they have affected people and the legacies there, and we're living with it now, and it's important.
Yes, absolutely.
You're here.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. All right, I think we